The sun was setting behind the towering skyline of the city, its orange and pink hues painting the glass buildings with a ghostly glow. Sarah stood still in the middle of her living room, looking out the window, her face expressionless, yet her hands trembled as they gripped the thick, expensive envelope. The faint sound of traffic could be heard in the distance, but the world outside her luxury apartment seemed to fade into nothing. Inside, the silence felt suffocating, and her pulse hammered in her ears. She should have known. The signs had been there, always lurking at the edge of her awareness. But she had trusted him. Too much, perhaps. She had believed that the man she had married, the man who had promised to love her forever, the man who had stood by her side through every milestone, would never betray her. But now, standing there with the weight of this envelope in her hands, the harsh truth had finally surfaced. Her husband, Daniel, had betrayed her. And it wasn't just a small infidelity that could be swept under the rug. No. This was far worse. She carefully slid her finger along the edge of the envelope, the thick paper cutting through her skin. Her breathing became shallow, and her stomach twisted in knots. She could already feel the lump growing in her throat. But she had to know. She had to face it. With trembling hands, she pulled out the letter. Her eyes scanned the neat, almost rehearsed handwriting on the first page, and as each word passed under her eyes, the blood drained from her face. Sarah. I've tried to do this in person, but I know you'd never understand. You'd never forgive me, no matter how much I wanted you to. This is something I can't take back, something I can't change now. I'm leaving. I'm going to her. I know I've failed you, and I'm sorry for that. But what we had, it wasn't real anymore. You're the last person I want to hurt, but I need to live my life. And I need you to let me go. The letter seemed to stretch before her, the words blurring as she reread the lines, trying to make sense of them, but she couldn't. She didn't understand. How could he do this? After everything they had been through together, the love, the arguments, the quiet moments, how could he so casually throw it all away? The inheritance, it's all gone. Every penny. Every dollar. I used it on her. On our future. Please don't hate me for that. The words hit her like a slap to the face. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her father's legacy, the money that had been passed down through generations, was gone. The family fortune, her cushion for any emergency, her security, was gone. Spent. By the man she had married. Spent on another woman. Another life. The letter continued, but Sarah could no longer read. The world around her had turned into a blur, spinning, fading into nothing. She collapsed onto the plush sofa, the envelope slipping from her hand onto the floor as her fingers clenched at the fabric of her dress. Her chest rose and fell, gasping for air as tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal. It was everything they had built together, the life they had dreamed of, and he had just thrown it all away. And then came the last line. The one that would echo in her mind for days, weeks, months to come. I hope you find peace in what's left, but I'm done. Done. Her world felt like it was crumbling beneath her. The life she had worked so hard to create, the comfort and security she had built from the ground up, was gone. Gone in a flash, ripped away by the very person who was supposed to protect it. She didn't know how long she sat there, frozen, staring at the wall. The silence around her felt almost deafening, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't know what to do. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling her from her daze. With shaky hands, she reached for it, the screen lighting up with a text from an unknown number. She stared at it for a moment, trying to gather the strength to open it. But curiosity won over. She tapped the message, and her eyes darted over the few short words. You don't know everything, Sarah. But you will soon. She swallowed hard. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as the weight of those words pressed down on her. She didn't know everything. Was there more to this? More than just the money? More than just Daniel's betrayal? What was going on? The message was unsettling, and for a moment, she considered ignoring it. But she couldn't. She had to know. What was happening? Before she could even think, the phone rang, and her heart skipped a beat. It was the same unknown number. She hesitated, glancing at the screen. Should she answer? Or would it just be another cruel twist in her already shattered world? The phone rang again. Finally, she answered. Hello? A voice, low and almost menacing, crackled on the other end. Sarah, you don't know me. But I know everything. Everything you've been blind to. Everything you're about to find out. The truth isn't what you think. Her pulse quickened, and her fingers gripped the phone tighter. Who is this? She demanded. Her voice was steady, but there was a quiver in it that betrayed her calm exterior. You'll understand soon. All the pieces will fall into place, Sarah. But I can't help you unless you're willing to listen. Unless you want to see the truth. The whole truth. The line went dead. The room seemed to close in on her. The weight of the words sank deep into her chest. She sat there, breathless, with a growing sense of dread that something far worse was coming, something far darker than the betrayal of her husband. What had she gotten herself into? What truth was out there, hidden in the shadows? The inheritance was gone, Daniel was gone, but this message, this strange, ominous warning, was like a puzzle piece she couldn't ignore. She paced back and forth across the room, trying to steady her thoughts. She felt like a stranger in her own life. Nothing made sense anymore. The man she loved had abandoned her for another woman, taken everything she had, and left her with nothing but a series of cryptic messages and an uncertain future. What if this was just the beginning? What if there was something bigger at play, something she hadn't even begun to understand? The message had felt like a warning, but a warning for what? What was coming? As the night deepened and the city lights flickered outside, Sarah felt an unshakable sense of unease crawl up her spine. The storm that had been brewing for months, the cracks in her marriage, the secrets her husband had kept, now, it seemed like something even more sinister was unfolding. The question burned in her mind, what was Daniel involved in that had led him to destroy everything they had? And why had someone sent her that message? With each passing second, the mystery deepened, and she realized that her journey, this journey to uncover the truth, was only just beginning. She didn't know where it would lead, or what she would discover along the way. But one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let this go. Not until she knew everything. The next few days were a blur for Sarah. Time seemed to stretch and contort in ways that made it feel like nothing was real anymore. Each morning, she awoke to the same empty apartment, the same hollow silence that had followed her since Daniel left. The sound of her own breathing became deafening, as though the air itself was mocking her. She had tried to keep herself busy, moving through her day as if everything were normal. But nothing was normal. Not anymore. Each passing moment reminded her of how much she had lost, her trust in Daniel, her inheritance, her sense of security. But it wasn't just that. There was something far darker, something more insidious, gnawing at her from the inside. The message. You don't know everything, Sarah. But you will soon. The words echoed in her mind, leaving her uneasy, like a shadow that never quite left her side. The problem was, she didn't know where to start. The more she tried to make sense of it all, the more tangled everything became. What could it mean? What had Daniel been involved in? Why was someone contacting her, urging her to uncover the truth? With no answers, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't just sit around waiting for things to fall into her lap. She had to act. But where? Where could she start unraveling the mystery that had now consumed her entire existence? Her first instinct was to go through Daniel's things. Maybe there would be some clue, something that would point her in the right direction. She had already packed up most of his belongings, but there were a few things she hadn't gotten around to yet. His office. It was still untouched, a reminder of everything that had once been. She knew she shouldn't have gone in there. It felt wrong, like betraying what little privacy he had left. But she didn't care anymore. All the rules, all the boundaries, they had been shattered the moment he left with her fortune, the moment he left with the woman he had chosen over her. Taking a deep breath, Sarah crossed the threshold into the small home office where Daniel had spent most of his time. The desk was neat, almost too neat. His laptop sat in the center, the screen dark. Sarah hesitated before sitting down in the chair, the leather creaking under her weight. Her fingers brushed against the keyboard, but she didn't know where to begin. The drawers were the next logical step. The first one she opened was filled with random papers, old receipts, tax forms, and letters she had never seen before. She scanned them quickly, but nothing stood out. Until she reached the bottom drawer. It was locked. Her heart skipped a beat. Why would Daniel lock this drawer? What could he possibly be hiding? She ran her fingers along the edge of the drawer, feeling for any way to open it. Her mind raced, maybe it contained financial records, something related to the missing money, or even something darker. She knew she had to get inside. After a moment of hesitation, Sarah stood up and began searching the desk for the key. It wasn't in the usual places, on the shelf or in the drawer with pens and paperclips. But then, her eyes landed on a small, dusty box tucked away in the corner of the desk. She opened it slowly, feeling an odd sense of anticipation in her chest. Inside the box was a single key. Sarah's fingers trembled as she picked it up. It was old, the metal slightly tarnished, but it fit the lock perfectly. She slid the key into the drawer and turned it with a soft click. The drawer opened. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she pulled out a thick stack of papers. Most of them were financial documents, tax returns, bank statements, and investment records. But one paper stood out. It was a letter, folded and yellowed with age. The handwriting was unfamiliar. She unfolded the letter carefully, her mind racing as she read the words. Daniel, if you continue down this path, it will cost you everything. There is no turning back. The people involved are not like you. They don't care about your past, your promises, or your future. You need to get out before it's too late. This is your only warning. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. It was a warning. A warning from someone who knew Daniel, someone who knew what he was involved in. Sarah's hands shook as she read the letter again, trying to understand the gravity of it. Who was this person? Why had they written to him? But it wasn't just the letter that disturbed her. It was the other paper she had noticed, folded carefully behind it. It was an invoice. It didn't make sense at first, there was no name, no address. Just a number. A large number. She tried to ignore the rising panic inside her, focusing instead on the last part of the document, where it read. Final payment due. Your discretion is required. We meet again in 3 days. Do not fail us. Sarah felt her throat close in on itself. She couldn't breathe. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but they didn't fit together the way she had expected. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was something much larger, much more dangerous. Daniel's involvement with whoever had written this letter wasn't a simple affair gone wrong. It was something far more sinister. She slammed the drawer shut, the papers scattering across the desk as if mocking her. She couldn't stay here any longer. She needed answers. She needed to find out what Daniel had gotten himself into, and why he had chosen to leave her in the dark. With shaking hands, Sarah grabbed her phone and started searching. The name on the invoice, final payment due, had to mean something. She couldn't stop now. Not when she was so close. She ran the name through every search engine she could think of. Nothing. No results. Her frustration mounted. She was getting nowhere. But then, a thought occurred to her: what if the name wasn't a name at all? What if it was a code? She typed it again, slower this time, thinking of every possibility. And there it was. A result. A news article from several years ago. A story about a notorious criminal organization that had been operating under the radar for years. They were known for extorting wealthy individuals, getting them involved in illegal schemes, and then leaving them with nothing but destruction in their wake. The article mentioned their leader, someone who was never caught, someone who always operated in the shadows. Could this be what Daniel had been involved in? Sarah's mind raced, and a chilling realization settled in her gut. Daniel's affair, his betrayal, it wasn't just about love or money. He had been drawn into something far darker, something that would have destroyed him if he hadn't left her. But why had he left her with nothing? Why hadn't he warned her? And more importantly, who were these people he had crossed? Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a new message from the same unknown number. She opened it immediately, her heart pounding in her chest. "You're getting closer, Sarah. But it's not just about him anymore. It's about you. Be careful. The walls are closing in." Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was part of this story now. She had uncovered something that had been hidden for far too long. The web was tightening, and Sarah was caught in the middle of it. Sarah spent the next few hours locked in her apartment, consumed by the words in the letter and the cryptic messages from the unknown number. The deeper she delved into the enigma that had been Daniel's life, the more questions arose, each one more unsettling than the last. She couldn't turn away now. She had crossed a line. There was no going back. It was nearly midnight when Sarah decided she could no longer stay in the confines of her apartment. The walls felt suffocating, closing in on her as the weight of everything she'd learned pressed down on her chest. She needed fresh air. She needed to think. She slipped on her coat and stepped out into the cool night, the chill of the evening air sharpening her senses. The city was alive, a steady hum of life that contrasted sharply with the storm of confusion swirling in her mind. Her feet carried her through the streets almost by instinct. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she knew she had to move. She had to keep moving, because standing still felt like sinking into a pit of uncertainty. She passed the cafes, the storefronts, the people going about their business, none of them aware of the chaos unraveling in her life. But she couldn't escape it. It clung to her, just like the shadows of the night that stretched across the sidewalk. Her phone buzzed again, and Sarah's stomach tightened as she reached for it, already knowing who it was. The unknown number. "You're getting too close, Sarah. Stop now, before it's too late. You don't know what you're dealing with." Her heart raced. The warning felt so personal, so ominous. It was like whoever was behind these messages had eyes on her every move. They knew she was looking into Daniel's past, into his secrets. They knew she had uncovered something. But they didn't know how far she was willing to go. They couldn't possibly know that she wasn't going to stop now. She typed back quickly, her fingers trembling as she did. "Who are you? What do you know about Daniel?" For a long moment, there was no response. Sarah's breath came in shallow gasps, her heart pounding as she stared at the screen, waiting, hoping for some kind of answer. Finally, the reply came. "You'll find out soon enough. But trust me, you don't want to know. Let it go, Sarah. Before it's too late for you too." She stopped walking. The world around her seemed to fade as the weight of the words settled over her. Too late for you too. What did that mean? Was her life in danger now? Had she stepped into something she couldn't escape? A chill ran down her spine, but she pushed it aside. She couldn't back down now. She had to know what had really happened, what had driven Daniel to abandon her and ruin their lives. She had to know who had gotten him involved in this mess, and more importantly, why. But where did she go from here? Sarah knew she couldn't do this alone. She needed help, someone she could trust. But who? Who could she turn to? She couldn't go to the police, not yet. She didn't have enough evidence. And even if she did, would they believe her? Would they understand the gravity of what she was dealing with? That's when it hit her. She had one person left. A person who might be able to help her. Her best friend, Natalie. Natalie had always been there for her, through thick and thin. She had known Daniel, too. They had been friends for years, and maybe, just maybe, she could offer some insight into the strange turn Daniel's life had taken. She had to reach out to her. Pulling her phone from her pocket, Sarah quickly sent a message to Natalie. "I need to talk. Can you meet me? It's important." The reply came almost instantly. "Of course." "Where?" Sarah quickly typed the address of a quiet cafe a few blocks away, a place they used to go together to talk and unwind. She didn't have time to waste. She had to see Natalie, now. When she arrived, Natalie was already there, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee in front of her. Her warm smile was a welcome sight, but Sarah could tell from the look on her face that she was concerned. She had never seen her friend look so serious. "Hey," Sarah greeted her softly, taking a seat across from her. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course," Natalie replied, her voice low. "You've been a wreck lately. What's going on? You're scaring me." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She didn't want to come across as paranoid or crazy, but she knew that if anyone could help her make sense of the chaos, it would be Natalie. "Daniel's gone," Sarah began, her voice shaky. "But it's more than that. I found something that doesn't add up." Natalie's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward, sensing the seriousness in Sarah's voice. "What do you mean? What did you find?" Sarah explained everything, the inheritance, the mysterious messages, the warning, the letter, and the invoice. She told Natalie about Daniel's sudden departure and the cryptic note that had started it all. She laid out the details as best as she could, but even as she spoke, she realized how insane it all sounded. It was hard to believe, even for her. When she finished, there was silence between them. Natalie stared at her for a long moment, processing everything Sarah had just said. Finally, she spoke. "You're saying Daniel's involved in something dangerous? Like, really dangerous?" Natalie asked, her voice tight with concern. Sarah nodded. "I don't know all the details, but from what I found, he was mixed up in something he couldn't get out of. I don't think he left me just because of an affair. There's something bigger going on here, and I'm not sure if he was forced into it, or if he chose it. Either way, it's bad." Natalie's face hardened. "I don't like this. It sounds like you're dealing with some serious people, Sarah. Dangerous people. I don't think you should be poking around like this. What if they're watching you right now? What if they—" "I can't just walk away," Sarah interrupted, her voice firm. "I need to know the truth. If they're after Daniel, then they might be after me, too. And I'm not going to sit here and wait for something worse to happen." Natalie's eyes softened, her concern evident. She reached across the table, placing her hand over Sarah's. "I get it. But you need to be careful. You don't know who you're up against. You don't know how deep this goes." "I know," Sarah whispered. "But I don't have a choice." The weight of the situation hung between them like a dark cloud. Sarah could see the worry in Natalie's eyes, but she also saw something else, something she hadn't expected. A flicker of recognition. "Sarah," Natalie said slowly, almost hesitantly. "There's something you should know. Something I've never told you." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Natalie looked around nervously, as if making sure no one was listening. Then she leaned in, lowering her voice. "Daniel wasn't just having an affair. He was involved with people I don't think you want to mess with. They've been around for a long time. You don't cross them." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Who are they?" "I don't know everything," Natalie continued. "But I've heard rumors. There's a group, an organization, really, that operates in the shadows. They're into all sorts of things. Money laundering, extortion, drugs. And Daniel got in too deep. I tried to warn him, but he didn't listen. And now, I think he's running from them." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the truth was finally starting to emerge. But as the pieces fell into place, she couldn't shake the feeling that something even darker was on the horizon. Sarah sat motionless, her hand still resting in Natalie's, as the weight of the revelation slowly settled in. The room seemed smaller now, and the quiet hum of the cafe suddenly felt distant and far away. The air was thick with something ominous, a sense of impending danger that had been building ever since Daniel had walked out of her life. She stared at Natalie, her mind racing to process everything she had just been told. The organization. The rumors. The warnings. It was all coming into focus now, but it only led to more questions. Who were these people? Why had Daniel gotten involved with them? And why hadn't he told her the truth? Why hadn't he trusted her? Natalie squeezed her hand, breaking Sarah's thoughts. "I know it's a lot to take in. But you need to be careful. This isn't just some affair gone wrong. These people don't just walk away. They don't forget." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't realize how deep it went." Natalie looked at her with a mix of pity and concern. "You're not the only one. I didn't know everything either, but I knew enough to know that you shouldn't mess with them. The people Daniel got involved with, they don't care about anyone. Not even their own." The silence between them stretched on, the weight of the words hanging in the air like an unspoken threat. Sarah's mind raced as the pieces started to fall into place. She had been blind to the truth. She had been so wrapped up in her life, in her marriage, that she hadn't seen the cracks forming around her. But now, she couldn't deny it. Daniel had been living a double life. And everything he had done had led to this moment. "I don't know what to do, Natalie," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I've been left with nothing. I thought I had everything, money, security, love. But it was all a lie." Natalie leaned in, her voice low. "It wasn't just about the money, Sarah. You know that, right? Daniel didn't do this for you or for himself. He did it for them. He was caught up in something bigger than both of you. And now, they're not just after him." Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine. "They're after me." "Yes." Natalie's voice was grim. "I don't think they're going to stop. You've seen too much already. The things you found, those papers, the letters, the invoices. They know you're looking for answers, and they won't let you get away with it." The walls of the cafe seemed to close in on Sarah, her breath quickening as she imagined what could be coming for her. She had already been drawn into a world she didn't understand. But now, the fear was real. The danger was real. And it was coming for her. "What do I do?" Sarah whispered, her hands trembling in her lap. "You need to get out," Natalie said firmly. "You need to leave, go somewhere safe. You're not going to get answers by staying here. Not yet. Not until we know more. Sarah shook her head, disbelief written across her face. I can't just run. I need to find out what happened. I need to find out why Daniel left me with nothing. I need to know who's behind this and why. Natalie's eyes softened with sympathy, but her voice was firm. You're not going to find the answers by putting yourself in danger. You have to step back and think about what's at stake here. You can't solve this alone. You need help. And you need to stay alive. Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She couldn't just sit here, listening to the warnings. She couldn't run. Not now. She had come too far. She couldn't back down. I can't just walk away, Sarah said, her voice tight with determination. I need to know who did this to me. Natalie sighed, standing to meet Sarah's gaze. I know you're scared, but you're not alone. You don't have to do this by yourself. Let me help you. Sarah looked at her friend, her eyes searching for some sign of reassurance. But the truth was, Natalie didn't have the answers either. No one did. This was bigger than anything they had imagined. But Sarah knew one thing for sure, she couldn't live in the dark. Not when the truth was within her grasp. I can't just wait for someone else to find the answers for me, Sarah said, her voice steady. I need to do this. I need to take control. Natalie seemed to accept her decision, though her concern was still evident. Fine. But we do this together. You're not alone in this. The next few days felt like an endless blur of fear and uncertainty. Sarah couldn't stay in her apartment any longer. It wasn't just the danger. It was the fact that she felt trapped. The messages had come more frequently now. Each one more threatening than the last. You're getting closer, Sarah. Too close. Stop before it's too late. She couldn't ignore them. She couldn't just delete the messages and hope they would go away. The more she tried to ignore it, the stronger the pull became, the deeper the mystery dug its claws into her life. And then, late one evening, she received a message that made her heart stop. We know where you are. Panic surged through Sarah's veins. She looked over her shoulder, the sensation of being watched so overwhelming that it almost felt physical. She had never been this scared in her life. She had been warned. But it was too late to turn back now. She was already too deep. Sarah and Natalie began planning. They had to be smart about this. They couldn't just run to the police, not yet. They needed more proof, more answers. But what could they do? Who could they trust? As they worked late into the night, they tried to piece together what little information they had. The invoices. The letters. The cryptic messages. They knew they were missing something, something vital that could connect the dots. Then, Natalie had an idea. I remember something, she said, her eyes wide with realization. Something Daniel mentioned once, before everything fell apart. He mentioned a name. A person. Someone he worked with. A contact. But he was always so secretive about it. Never told me much. But the name, it stuck with me. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. What name? I think it was Raphael. Raphael something. He was a business partner, I think. Someone Daniel trusted. But I don't know who he really was. The name sent a shockwave through Sarah's body. Raphael. She had heard that name before. It was on the letter. On the invoice. She had seen it in the small print, tucked away in the corner of the document. Raphael, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to find him. The hunt for Raphael began, a trail of breadcrumbs leading Sarah and Natalie through shady online forums, private networks, and under-the-radar connections. The deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. Every corner seemed to lead them further into a maze they couldn't escape. They dug up accounts of people who had vanished without a trace, businesses that had crumbled under mysterious circumstances, and a network that spanned across continents. But Sarah knew one thing for sure now: Raphael was at the center of it all. He was the key. And finding him was their only hope. As they approached the truth, the tension between Sarah and the shadows grew unbearable. Every day that passed brought new revelations, but also new threats. They were being watched, monitored, and followed. Sarah could feel it with every breath she took, every footstep behind her. It was only a matter of time before the web closed in around her completely. But the truth was closer than ever. And Sarah wasn't about to stop now. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, frantic searches, and narrow escapes. Sarah and Natalie's pursuit of Raphael had taken them deep into the underbelly of a world they had never known existed. Every lead they followed seemed to open another door, revealing more lies and secrets. But it was clear now, they were not just fighting for the truth, they were fighting for their lives. It was late one evening when Sarah's phone buzzed, the screen flashing with a text message from an unknown number. "I know where you're looking. Stop now, or it will be the last mistake you make." The words were chilling, but they didn't stop Sarah. They only fueled the fire inside her. She was close. She could feel it. They were getting closer to Raphael, to the answers, and to the reason Daniel's life, and her own, had spiraled out of control. Every threat, every warning, made her more determined to get the truth. "Did you get another one?" Natalie asked, her voice a mixture of concern and frustration as she looked up from the papers scattered across the table in Sarah's living room. Sarah nodded grimly, tossing the phone aside. "They want me to stop. They think I'll be scared. But you're not scared, are you?" Natalie's voice was quiet but fierce. "You've come too far. We've come too far." "No," Sarah replied, her voice steady, though the fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of her resolve. "I'm not scared. I'm just tired. But we have to keep going. We're almost there, Natalie. We're so close." Natalie nodded. "We need a plan. A solid one. We've been chasing shadows for days now. We need to find Raphael. We need to know what happened to Daniel, and we need to know how this all connects." The two women had spent the last week sifting through Daniel's old contacts, tracking down anyone who might have known something about his secret life. But every road had led them to dead ends, every question answered with more questions. The network Daniel had become tangled in was vast, complicated, and dangerous. Whoever was behind it had their fingers in many pies, business dealings, money laundering, even darker activities, and Raphael seemed to be at the center of it all. But no one could give them a solid lead. That's when Sarah's phone buzzed again, this time with a name she recognized. Raphael Castillo. The text came from an unknown number, but the name sent a jolt through Sarah. Raphael Castillo. This was the lead they'd been waiting for. It was time. The game had changed. "You want answers? You want the truth? Meet me at the docks. Midnight. Come alone." Sarah's hand shook as she read the message. She looked at Natalie, whose expression mirrored her own. This was it. They were walking straight into the lion's den, but they didn't have a choice. They couldn't back down now. The night air was cool and crisp as Sarah and Natalie made their way toward the docks, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness of the streets. The silence was unsettling. The kind that made every movement feel too loud, every shadow too deep. Sarah's heart raced, her thoughts a jumbled mess of fear, adrenaline, and the hope that they would finally get the answers they had been searching for. They arrived at the docks a little before midnight, the area dark and deserted, the only sound the distant lapping of water against the shore. Sarah glanced around nervously, her hand instinctively reaching for her phone, checking the time. It was nearly midnight. Raphael had said he would be here. But where was he? We shouldn't be here, Sarah, Natalie whispered, her voice tinged with fear. This feels wrong. I know, Sarah replied, her voice tight. But we can't turn back now. We have to face this. They crept further into the docks, moving cautiously between the abandoned warehouses and cargo containers. The place smelled of saltwater and rust, a stale, heavy scent that clung to the air. Every step felt like it might be their last. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the distance. Sarah froze. Natalie tensed beside her, her eyes wide. Do you see that? Natalie asked, her voice barely audible. Sarah nodded, her heart racing. It's him. Rafael Castillo stepped out from behind a shipping container, his figure tall and imposing in the darkness. He wore a dark jacket, his face partially obscured by the shadows, but there was no mistaking the coldness in his eyes. He stood there for a moment, studying them, before he finally spoke. You're brave, I'll give you that. But I don't think you fully understand what you're dealing with. Sarah took a step forward, her voice trembling but determined. I want to know the truth. I want to know why Daniel left me, why he ruined everything. I want to know who you are, and what you've done. Raphael's lips curled into a sly smile. You think you want the truth? The truth will destroy you. I hope you're prepared for that. I don't care about the destruction anymore, Sarah said, her voice hard. I care about the truth. I need it. Raphael laughed softly, a dark, hollow sound. You've been digging, haven't you? You've been chasing ghosts, searching for answers in places you shouldn't go. You don't know what you're up against. I'm not afraid, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the fear twisting inside her. I have to know what happened to Daniel. Raphael's expression shifted slightly, his eyes narrowing. Daniel was a pawn, just like you are now. You're in over your head, Sarah. You should have walked away while you had the chance. But now, you've crossed a line. And there's no going back. He took a step closer, his eyes locking with hers. Daniel made his choices. But now it's your turn. And your choices will determine everything. Suddenly, a loud sound echoed through the docks, footsteps from behind. Before Sarah could react, two men emerged from the shadows, large and menacing. They moved quickly, grabbing Sarah and Natalie by the arms, pulling them roughly toward a nearby van. Let go of me. Natalie shouted, struggling against their grip. Sarah! What are they doing? Sarah's mind was racing, her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment she had feared, the moment when everything would fall apart. She had been so close to the truth, but now she was trapped. Raphael watched calmly as Sarah and Natalie were forced into the van. You should have listened, he said, his voice almost pitying. This is what happens when you dig too deep. As the van doors slammed shut, Sarah's thoughts whirled. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had prepared herself for danger, but this was something else. The air in the van was thick with tension, the two men sitting on either side of them, watching them like hawks. But Sarah wasn't about to give up. Not now. She turned to Natalie, her eyes burning with determination. We're not done yet. We're getting out of here. We'll find a way. We have to. Natalie nodded, her expression grim but resolute. I'm with you. We're getting out. The van drove for what felt like hours, winding through unfamiliar streets, the city's skyline fading into the distance. Sarah could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, but she refused to let herself crumble. She wouldn't give up now. They were so close. She could taste the truth, even if it came with a price. Finally, the van stopped. The doors opened, and they were hauled out onto a dimly lit parking lot. The two men shoved them forward, their grip tightening as they walked toward a building in the distance, an old warehouse, long abandoned by the looks of it. Raphael stepped into view, his face shadowed, his eyes cold. "This is where your journey ends, Sarah. You wanted the truth. Now, you're going to learn it the hard way." The cold, metallic scent of the warehouse hit Sarah like a wall when they were shoved inside. Her breath caught in her chest as the harsh light from a lone overhead bulb flickered above them, casting long shadows across the floor. Her mind raced. This was it. This was the moment she had been both dreading and yearning for. The truth was just out of reach, but she knew it wouldn't come easily. It never did. The two men who had forced them out of the van stood like silent sentinels on either side, watching Sarah and Natalie with cold, impassive expressions. Their presence was a reminder that escape wasn't an option. Not here. Not now. Raphael stepped forward, his silhouette barely visible in the dim light. He was calm, too calm, and his eyes glinted with a mixture of amusement and something darker, something that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. "I warned you," Raphael's voice was low, almost amused. "You didn't listen. You thought you could dig around in places you didn't belong, that you could uncover the truth. But some truths, Sarah, they're meant to stay buried." Natalie was the first to speak, her voice fierce, though the fear was still evident in her eyes. "You've been lying to us, Raphael. To Sarah. To Daniel. Why? What's this all about?" Raphael's lips curled into a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. He stepped closer, and Sarah instinctively stepped back, her pulse quickening. She needed to stay calm, to think. They needed to stay in control, no matter how bad it seemed. This wasn't over yet. "You think you're entitled to the truth," Raphael said slowly, his voice almost like a whisper. "But you're not. None of you are. Daniel, your husband, was a fool. And now you're following in his footsteps, digging into things that you don't understand." He paused, his eyes narrowing as he seemed to consider his next words carefully. "Let me make something clear. Daniel wasn't just involved in some petty affair. He was in too deep. In way too deep. He thought he could make a clean escape. He thought he could leave everything behind. But there's no escaping this world, Sarah. There's no way out once you're in." Sarah's head spun. "What are you talking about? What did Daniel get involved in?" Raphael's expression darkened. "Daniel was dealing with people far more dangerous than you could ever imagine. The organization he got tangled with? It's not just about money. It's about power. Control. The kind of control that doesn't let anyone walk away without paying the price." Sarah's stomach twisted. She could barely keep up. Power? Control? She thought back to everything Daniel had done, to the sudden distance between them, the lies, the secrets he had kept from her. She had thought it was all about his affair, but now she realized just how naive she had been. "Where is Daniel?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with desperation. "What happened to him?" Raphael's eyes flashed, and for the first time, Sarah saw a flicker of something in his gaze, something that wasn't pure calculation. It was almost a look of sympathy, but it was fleeting. "Daniel is gone, Sarah. He made his choice, and it cost him everything. He betrayed people who don't forgive. And in the end, he paid the ultimate price." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the air growing heavier around her, the reality of what he was saying sinking in like a stone in her gut. Daniel was gone. He was dead. Is he? Sarah couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The answer was in Raphael's eyes. "Yes, he's dead," Raphael confirmed, his voice almost detached. "He made too many mistakes. He thought he could get away with it, but there's no escaping people like us. And now you're tangled in it too. You need to let this go, Sarah." You need to walk away, or you'll end up just like him. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had thought Daniel's betrayal was bad enough, but now, to learn that he was gone, the grief was overwhelming, threatening to drown her. But somewhere, deep inside, she felt a flicker of something stronger. The need for answers, for closure. She couldn't let it go. She couldn't just accept his death without knowing the full truth. What is this organization? Natalie asked, her voice almost a whisper, as though she feared the answer. Who are they? And why did Daniel get involved with them? Raphael took a slow breath, seeming to weigh his words. They're not just an organization. They're a network. A secret society that deals in everything: drugs, weapons, political influence. They operate in the shadows, pulling strings, making deals that no one can trace. They don't have a name, at least not one that anyone knows. They're too clever for that. But if you cross them, if you even think of betraying them, you'll disappear. Just like Daniel. Sarah's mind raced as she processed everything he was saying. The weight of it all felt unbearable. She had no idea Daniel had been involved in something so dark, so far-reaching. He had always been distant, but she had never suspected that the man she had loved was a part of something so dangerous. And now, he was gone. Because of them. Raphael stepped closer, his face hardening. You're in this world now, whether you like it or not. You've seen too much. You know too much. If you want to survive, you'll need to forget everything you've learned here tonight. Walk away. Forget Daniel. Forget us. Sarah's fists clenched. There was no way she could walk away from this. She needed to know everything, even if it meant facing danger head-on. She couldn't just let them get away with it. No, she said, her voice firm. I won't forget. Not until I know the truth. Raphael's face twisted in anger, but there was something else there too, a hint of respect. You're a fool. But I respect your determination. He turned away, gesturing to the two men who had been standing silently by the door. Take them to the back. It's time to finish this. Before Sarah could react, the two men grabbed her and Natalie, pulling them toward the back of the warehouse. The air grew colder, the dim lights casting long, eerie shadows on the cracked concrete floor. There were no windows here, no escape. They were trapped. But Sarah wasn't going down without a fight. She turned to Natalie, her eyes filled with determination. We can't let them win. We need to escape. We need to keep fighting. Natalie nodded, her expression grim but resolute. We will. We have to. The men dragged them into a small, windowless room at the back of the warehouse. The door slammed shut behind them, and for a moment, the only sound was the pounding of Sarah's heart in her ears. Then, out of nowhere, a voice spoke, low, gravelly, and familiar. You've made a terrible mistake. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she turned toward the voice. There, standing in the shadows of the corner, was Daniel. Alive.